Hi, I'm Sarah. Today I'm going to read you the story of Tasha, which is titled like this: My sister moved in with me when she lost her job and broke up with her boyfriend. 5 months later, I caught her and my husband in bed. Now she is pregnant, and my parents demand I be generous, leave them the house and financially support your future nephew. They didn't like my answer. Well, let's go. My name is Tasha and I'm 30 years old. I've always been the responsible one in my family. While other kids dreamed of being astronauts or movie stars, I had my eyes set on something more concrete: my own house. I worked my ass off through college, studied computer science, and landed a job at a hot IT startup right after graduation. The pay was fantastic, and by 26, I'd saved enough to buy my dream home, a modest but beautiful 2-story house with a small backyard where I could drink my morning coffee. 3 years ago, I married Mike. We met at a tech conference where he was working as a marketing consultant. He moved into my house after we got married. My parents insisted on a prenuptial agreement before the wedding. I agreed, though Mike seemed a bit offended at first. My family situation was complicated. I helped my parents financially, paying their bills when they couldn't make ends meet, which happened more often than I liked to admit. Then there was my younger sister, Jen. She's 27, 3 years younger than me, and the complete opposite of responsible. She lived in a rented apartment with her boyfriend, Derek, whom I rarely saw. Their relationship was a roller coaster. They'd fight dramatically, then she'd run to our parents' house, then they'd make up, and the cycle would repeat. I didn't mind helping my family. I made good money, and I believed family should support each other. But sometimes, I wondered if they saw me as more of a safety net than a daughter or sister. Mike and I had a tradition of having dinner with my parents twice a month. Last Sunday, we arrived at their place to find Jen there, red-eyed and alone. "Where's Derek?" I asked as I hung up my jacket. Jen burst into tears. "We broke up, he kicked me out." Between sobs, Jen explained that she'd lost her job at the boutique where she worked. Derek said he wasn't going to support me with his money. He gave me 2 days to pack my stuff and leave. My dad cleared his throat. "Tasha, we need to talk to you." I knew that tone. It was the "we need a favor" tone. "Jen's going through a really rough time," my mom said, squeezing my sister's hand. "She needs help finding a job, and she needs a place to stay." "She's been sleeping on our couch," my dad added. "But you know how small our apartment is." I looked at Jen, whose makeup was smeared down her cheeks. I felt a pang of sympathy, but also dread. I loved my house precisely because it was my space, mine and Mike's. "We were hoping," my mom continued, "that you could let her stay with you for a little while. Just until she gets back on her feet." I glanced at Mike, who gave me a small shrug that seemed to say your call. "And maybe," my dad added hopefully, "you could help her find a job? You know so many people in your company." I took a deep breath. I didn't want to do it, I really didn't. But I looked at Jen, who seemed genuinely broken, and I thought about what I'd want if I were in her shoes. "Fine," I said with a heavy sigh, "you can stay with us for a while, Jen. And I'll talk to my boss about possible openings." Jen jumped up and hugged me tightly. Thank you, I promise I won't be any trouble." Mike nodded. "It'll be fine," he said, squeezing my hand under the table. I wasn't so sure, but I smiled anyway. What else could I do? Family helps family, right? Jen moved in with us a few days later. I cleared out the guest room and set some ground rules. She'd help with housework, look actively for a job, and respect our privacy. She agreed to everything enthusiastically. True to my word, I spoke to my boss, Daniel, about my sister's situation. "She has customer service experience from the boutique," I said, trying to make her sound as employable as possible. Daniel thought for a moment. "We actually need an office manager. The position opened up last week. Do you think she'd be interested?" I could have hugged him. "That would be perfect, thank you so much." That evening at dinner, I told Jen about the opportunity. "Really?" Her eyes lit up. "You think I could do that?" "I know you can," I said, feeling optimistic for the first time since she'd moved in. You'll start on Monday, we can drive to work together. And just like that, our new living arrangement began. I'd wake up early, get ready for work, and Jen would join me in my car for the commute. Sometimes I'd come home alone because her workday ended earlier than mine. On those days, I'd arrive to find dinner prepared by Jen and Mike. It seemed to be working out better than I'd expected. Jen was helpful around the house and dedicated at work. On weekends, she'd go out with her friends, giving Mike and me some alone time. I noticed that Mike and Jen had developed a friendship. They'd watch movies together in the living room while I worked in my home office, catching up on projects. Sometimes I'd hear them laughing at some comedy show. I didn't mind, I trusted both of them completely, and I was glad they got along. About 3 months after Jen moved in, I got a call from Daniel that changed everything. I was sitting at my desk reviewing code when my phone rang. He explained that the company was expanding, opening a branch in Colorado. Because of my expertise with our systems, he wanted me to oversee the setup. This meant a business trip that would last about 3 weeks. I was flattered and excited. This was a huge opportunity to prove myself, possibly leading to a promotion. I accepted immediately, though a small part of me worried about leaving Mike and Jen alone for so long. That night at dinner, I shared the news. "That's amazing, Tash," Jen exclaimed, serving herself more pasta, "your first big business trip." Mike nodded but seemed distracted. 3 weeks is a long time. "I know," I said, reaching for his hand across the table. "But this is important for my career." Jen jumped in, "Don't worry about anything here. I'll take care of the house and Mike while you're gone." I laughed at her joke. "I'm sure you both will survive without me." The next 2 weeks flew by as I prepared for the trip. I made lists of household instructions, stocked the freezer with meals, and packed my suitcase meticulously. Before I knew it, I was kissing Mike goodbye at the airport. During those 3 weeks, I worked 16-hour days setting up the new office, hiring staff, and troubleshooting systems. Despite being exhausted, I made sure to video call Mike every other night. Jen often appeared in the background, waving and sending her regards. They seemed to be getting along fine, though I noticed Mike sometimes seemed distant on our calls, claiming work was stressful. Finally, my work was done, and I flew home, eager to see my husband. When I arrived, something felt off. Mike greeted me with a hug, but it wasn't the passionate reunion I'd expected after 3 weeks apart. He said he was just tired from a difficult project at work, so I didn't push it. Life resumed its normal rhythm. Jen and I carpooled to work, Mike and I slept in the same bed, and we all ate dinner together most evenings. Yet there was a tension in the air I couldn't quite identify. Then I noticed something odd. Jen had changed her at-home wardrobe. Instead of the baggy sweats and t-shirts she used to wear, she now lounged around in tiny shorts and revealing tops. One evening, as she reached across the dinner table wearing a low-cut tank top, I decided to say something. "Jen, could you maybe dress a bit more appropriately around the house?" Her face immediately fell. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Just that we all live here, and maybe super revealing clothes aren't the best choice for family dinners." She pushed back her chair and stood up. "Sorry for offending your delicate sensibilities," she snapped before storming off to her room. I looked at Mike, expecting support, but instead found him frowning at me. "Don't you think you were a bit harsh?" he asked. "It's hot in the house, and she's just trying to be comfortable." I stared at him, surprised by his defense of my sister. "It's the middle of October, it's not that hot." He shrugged and returned to his food. That moment stuck with me, the way he'd sided with Jen over something so trivial. Over the next few days, I watched them closely. Did Mike's eyes linger on Jen a bit too long? Did Jen smile at him more brightly than necessary? I couldn't tell if I was seeing real signs or just projecting my insecurities. When I observed them directly, they barely interacted, making me feel foolish for my suspicions. I pushed those thoughts away, focusing instead on work. The Colorado branch was doing well, but there were still plenty of issues that needed my attention remotely. 2 months after my return, Daniel called me into his office. I knew immediately from his expression that another trip was coming. The Colorado branch is having some technical issues that need your expertise, he explained. I'm sorry to ask this of you again so soon, but you're the only one who fully understands the systems. I nodded, already mentally preparing my travel checklist. How long will I be gone this time? At least 2 weeks, possibly longer depending on how complicated the problems are. That evening at dinner, I broke the news to Mike and Jen. Was it my imagination, or did they exchange a quick glance before expressing their disappointment? That really sucks, Mike said, reaching for my hand. We'll miss you. Jen nodded. Yeah, but you'll solve everything super fast and be back before we know it. Something about their reactions felt rehearsed, but I smiled and thanked them for being understanding. What else could I do? This was my job, my career, and I needed to focus on that. The next week, I boarded a plane to Colorado, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling in my stomach. The problems at the branch turned out to be less complicated than expected. With focused effort, I managed to identify and fix the issues in just 10 days, much faster than anticipated. I decided to surprise Mike by coming home early. I didn't tell anyone about my change of plans, not Mike, not Jen, not even my parents. I just booked an earlier flight, feeling excited about seeing the look on Mike's face when I walked through the door. My plane landed late in the evening. I grabbed my luggage, hailed a taxi, and headed home, imagining the surprise reunion with my husband. As I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, I immediately noticed something strange. The house was dimly lit, with what looked like candle light flickering from the living room. I set down my suitcase quietly and moved toward the light. What I saw made me freeze in place. Our dining table was set for two, with wine glasses, candles, and flowers. For a split second, I thought perhaps Mike had somehow found out about my early return and prepared a romantic surprise for me. Then I heard sounds from upstairs, our bedroom. My heart began to pound as I slowly climbed the stairs, hoping against hope that I was misinterpreting everything. But deep down, I already knew what I would find. I pushed open the bedroom door, and the world seemed to stop spinning. There, in our bed, my bed, were Mike and Jen, tangled in the sheets. They didn't notice me at first, too wrapped up in each other. When they finally saw me standing in the doorway, they scrambled to cover themselves, panic written across their faces. Tasha, Mike gasped, pulling the sheet up, you don't understand. But I understood perfectly. The romantic dinner downstairs, the way they'd been acting before I left, the revealing clothes, the defending each other. All the pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. My body felt ice cold, but my face burned with rage. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself, knuckles turning white. Get out, I said, my voice deadly quiet, both of you. Get your things and get out of my house. Jen, who should have been embarrassed, ashamed, or at least silent, had the audacity to speak up. I'm not going anywhere, she said, clutching the sheet to her chest. You can't just throw us out. Something snapped inside me. I stormed across the hall to Jen's room and flung open her closet door. I grabbed armfuls of her clothes and threw them into the hallway. Watch me, I snarled, continuing to empty her drawers. Jen ran after me, wrapped in the sheet, screaming and trying to stop me. I whirled around to face her. You have exactly 1 hour to get your stuff and leave, or I'm calling the police to report trespassers in my home. My face must have shown the depth of my fury because she took a step back. And believe me, you don't want to test me right now. Mike approached, now wearing boxers. Tasha, let's talk about this rationally. Rational? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. You want rational after I caught you in bed with my sister? Get your stuff and get out before I do something I won't regret. They must have seen something in my eyes that scared them because they started packing immediately. I stood in the hallway, arms crossed, watching as they stuffed clothes into suitcases and bags. Neither dared to speak to me again. Within 45 minutes, they had loaded everything into Mike's car and left. I sank onto the living room sofa, staring at the romantic dinner they'd set, the candles now pooling wax onto my tablecloth. I finally allowed myself to cry, great heaving sobs that seemed to come from the depths of my soul. An hour later, my phone started ringing. Mom's name flashed on the screen. I ignored it. It rang again. And again. After the seventh call, I answered, my voice hoarse from crying. "What?" I snapped. "How could you?" Mom's voice was shrill with anger. "How could you kick your pregnant sister out onto the street?" The words hit me like a physical blow. Pregnant? My sister was pregnant with my husband's child? The room started spinning again. "I kicked out two people who betrayed me in the worst possible way," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "What did you expect me to do? Offer them my bedroom?" "You're overreacting," Mom said dismissively, "these things happen. You need to calm down and think about this rationally." I couldn't believe what I was hearing, my own mother was defending them. "Come over to our house tomorrow evening," she continued. "We need to talk about this like adults." I hung up without responding, turned off my phone, and crawled into the guest bedroom. I couldn't bear to sleep in my own bed, not after what I'd seen there. The next morning, I called in sick to work and went straight to a lawyer's office. I explained my situation, my voice mechanical as I recounted the betrayal. "I have a prenuptial agreement," I told the lawyer, a stern-looking woman named Regina. "We signed it before the wedding. It states that neither of us can claim the other's property in case of divorce." Regina reviewed the document and nodded, "This is a solid agreement. Your husband won't be able to make any claims on your house or your personal accounts. The house is particularly protected since you purchased it before your marriage." That evening, with the divorce papers in hand, I drove to my parents' house. They were all waiting for me, Mom and Dad sitting on the couch, Jen and Mike on the love seat opposite them. Jen had her hand protectively over her stomach, though there was no visible bump yet. The sight made me sick. Without a word, I walked up to Mike and thrust the divorce papers at him. He took them, his eyes widening as he realized what they were. "This is for the best," Mom said, seeing the documents. "Now Mike can marry Jen, and they can be a proper family." I stared at her, stunned by how easily she'd accepted, even celebrated, the destruction of my marriage. Jen smiled, actually smiled, as if this was all working out perfectly. "Mom wasn't finished, we need to discuss living arrangements. The house is yours, legally, but surely you understand that Jen and Mike need a place to live with the baby coming." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "Excuse me?" "We're hoping you'll be generous," Dad chimed in. "They need somewhere to live and raise your nephew or niece. We thought you might give them your house." Mom nodded enthusiastically, "and maybe help them financially, too. Just until they get on their feet with the baby." I looked around the room, feeling like I'd stepped into some bizarre alternate reality. My parents were seriously asking me to give my house to my cheating husband and sister? And financially support them? "Have you all lost your minds?" I finally managed to say. "You want me to reward them for betraying me?" Jen leaned forward, "If you don't help us, we'll sue for half of everything. Mike is entitled to half as your husband." I laughed then, a cold sound with no humor in it. I pulled out the prenuptial agreement from my purse and waved it at them. "You might want to read this before making threats. According to this contract, the one you all encouraged me to have Mike sign, remember? All property remains mine." The color drained from Mike's face, my parents exchanged worried glances. "Tasha, be reasonable," Dad pleaded. "Think about family, think about the baby." "Family?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Is that what you call this? Betrayal and then extortion?" "No, I'm divorcing Mike, I'm cutting Jen out of my life, and I'm done supporting all of you financially. You chose sides, and you didn't choose mine." I returned home that night and immediately called a locksmith. By midnight, all the locks in my house had been changed. I sent an email to my boss explaining that I needed a few personal days to deal with some urgent family matters. Then I blocked the phone numbers of my parents, Jen, and Mike. Despite my efforts to shut them out, the calls still came. They used different numbers, left voicemails, and sent emails with increasingly desperate tones. My mother alternated between begging and demanding that I reconsider. My father tried reasoning with me about family obligations. Jen sent guilt-laden messages about the baby. I deleted them all. For 2 weeks, I barely left the house except to meet with my lawyer. I was going through the motions, feeling hollow inside. The divorce proceedings began, and as expected, Mike initially fought against it. His lawyer made vague threats about taking me to court for half of everything, but Regina assured me the prenuptial agreement was ironclad. Eventually, Mike's lawyer must have explained the reality of the situation to him, because he agreed to mediation instead of a court battle. The first mediation session was as uncomfortable as I'd imagined. Mike arrived with Jen, who now had a small but visible baby bump. She clung to Mike's arm possessively, throwing triumphant glances my way. The mediator, a soft-spoken but firm woman, guided us through the division of assets. As Regina had predicted, the prenuptial agreement was upheld. I kept my house, my car, and my personal bank accounts. Mike kept his considerably smaller savings and his car. It was a clean break financially, though the emotional wound still felt raw. As we gathered our things to leave after the final mediation session, Jen approached me while Mike was speaking with his lawyer. "You think you've won, don't you?" she hissed, low enough that only I could hear. "But look who's going home alone to an empty house. I've got Mike and soon a baby. Who's really the loser here?" I looked at my sister, this stranger wearing my sister's face, and felt an unexpected wave of pity. "You've got an unfaithful man with barely enough money to pay rent," I replied calmly. "Good luck with that." Her face contorted with anger, but I walked away before she could respond. That was the last time I spoke to her directly. Life settled into a new rhythm. I threw myself into work, finding solace in the familiar challenges of coding and system architecture. My colleagues were supportive without being intrusive, respecting my privacy while offering subtle gestures of solidarity. Jen quit my company, unable to stand the disapproving stares. Daniel assigned me interesting projects that kept my mind occupied and away from dwelling on the betrayal. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I was working late at home when the doorbell rang. I approached cautiously and peered through the peephole. My mother stood on the porch, looking older than I remembered. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. She didn't wait for an invitation, pushing past me into the foyer. "We need to talk, Tasha, your sister is due in a few weeks." I crossed my arms. "That has nothing to do with me." "Of course it does, this is your nephew we're talking about." She began pacing my living room. "Jen and Mike are struggling financially. The apartment they can afford is tiny and in a bad neighborhood. Not suitable for a baby at all." I knew where this was heading but let her continue. "I've been thinking," she said, sitting down uninvited on my couch. "If you won't give them the house outright, you could at least sell it and give half the money to your sister. That would be the fair thing to do." "Fair?" I repeated, the word sticking in my throat. "Was it fair when my husband and sister betrayed me? Was it fair when you took their side?" My mother had the audacity to look offended. "You're being selfish, think about the baby." "Get out," I said quietly, "get out of my house and don't come back." She tried to argue further, but I opened the front door and stood beside it, immovable. Finally, she left, muttering about my cruelty and selfishness. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of guilt, I was long past that, but because I realized I'd never truly be free as long as I remained where my family could find me. The next day, I approached Daniel with a question. "That branch in Colorado," I began, "is the offer to run it still open?" Daniel looked surprised but pleased. "Actually, yes. The manager we hired didn't work out. Are you interested?" I nodded. "I need a fresh start." Within a month, I had quietly listed my house for sale with strict instructions to my realtor to keep it off public listings. I told no one in my family about my plans. When the house sold, for more than I'd paid for it, I packed up my life and moved to Colorado without leaving a forwarding address. In my new city, I bought a smaller but newer house in a neighborhood full of young professionals. I settled into my role as branch manager, enjoying the challenges and responsibilities. The team respected me, and I found satisfaction in building something new from the ground up. 6 months passed peacefully. I made new friends, joined a hiking group, and even started dating again, cautiously. Then one evening, I checked my rarely used personal email account and found a message from my mother. "We came to see you and show you your nephew," it read. "Some strangers are living in your house now. How could you be so cruel as to leave without telling us? Where are you? We have a right to know." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then hit delete without replying. They had no rights to my life anymore. I had rebuilt it without them, and I intended to keep it that way. Last weekend, I went on a third date with Ben, a software engineer I met through work. He's kind, intelligent, and makes me laugh, something I didn't realize how much I'd missed. When he asked about my family, I simply said we weren't close. He didn't push for details, which I appreciated. As I sit on my new patio, watching the Colorado sunset paint the mountains in gold and purple, I feel something I haven't felt in a long time: peace. The betrayal will always be part of my story, a scar that occasionally aches when the weather changes. But it doesn't define me anymore. My phone buzzes with a text from Ben, asking if I'd like to go hiking tomorrow. I smile and type back a yes. I don't know where this relationship will lead, but I'm open to the possibility of happiness again. And that, perhaps, is the greatest victory